I wish I weighed this when I played ball. I couldn't get my weight up.
It's funny how you really lose. I don't think I'll be involved anymore.
And I used to wrestle heavyweight, and they cut me to 175. A small girl could be. It was horrible. Never watched a heavyweight thing. Always blew it at 175. I'd just get exhausted. And I could crush them. Well, I know. I mean, I could kill it. Right? 65. It was. It almost killed my son. My son was a captain. And my dad went over and started helping out. So he had actually sat.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Bill Yarbrough, and I am the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio. If you've never heard of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio, we are part of the National Republican Liberty Caucus, the longest-running organization in the Liberty Republican movement, starting in 1991. We're an all-volunteer organization. We hope that you'll check us out. We keep the lights on through dues of our members at RLCOH.org. We're very pleased this evening, ducking out of the Ashland Lincoln Day dinner. Is that correct, Mr. Gibbons?
It is. It is. And please, Mike, my father was Mr. Gibbons.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it. We have you coming in and out right now, so I apologize. It's going to take just a moment to bring you back up. Looks like we just lost you. Oh, my goodness. We spent all this time getting you on board, and now we just lost you, so it's going to take just a moment. For those folks who are watching us, please understand that we also had an opportunity to interview Jim Renacci. We're hoping to have Melissa Atkinson also online, and that Jim Renacci can be found on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube channel. Just look for Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio. So we're going to wait here just a moment. Hopefully we can get Mr. Gibbons back up. His Skype connection had ratted out on us, so let's just wait just one moment. It looks like we had lost you there for a moment, Mike, but I think we got you back.
You did.
Oh, very good.
Just calling you on your, if it happens again, I'll call you on your cell.
Okay, very good. That way we can make sure we keep the conversation going. So thanks again for ducking out of the Lincoln Day dinner. I appreciate it. For those folks who haven't had an opportunity to learn anything about you, Mike, because you're running on the fact that you're not a career politician, so maybe quite a few folks haven't heard from you. So let's get to the stump speech, if we will, on Mike Gibbons and his background, if you would.
Sure. You know, I usually start out with a story from my campaigning. I've been campaigning since really started in earnest about August 1st or so, and you know, I've been to just a bunch of county fairs, Oktoberfest, hog roast. In fact, I'm the hog roast king, and I ended up in Minster, Ohio, at the Oktoberfest, and I was with one of the campaign workers. And as I said, I'm not a politician. I've never run for office before. And I decided that if I'm going to travel 3.5 hours, I'm going to find the most unhealthy thing I can to eat when I get there, just as a reward for doing it. And I decided I like funnel cakes. So we're sitting there eating my funnel. I'm sitting there eating my funnel cake with my campaign person, Amy. And an elderly couple came down and sat down beside us. And the lady part of that couple, and by the way, if you're from Minster, don't be insulted, because everybody I know from Minster said they couldn't possibly have been from Minster. But my Amy jumped up and said, "This is Mike Gibbons. He's running for the U.S. Senate." And she said, "Well, are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And I said, "I'm a Republican." And she said, "Well, I'm not voting for you." And I said, "Well, why not? I'm a good guy. Why don't you talk to me? Maybe you will." And she says, "No possibility." And I said, "Well, what's that all about?" She goes, "Well, I believe that the government should take care of us from cradle to grave."
Huh.
So I said, you know, so I kind of said, I said, "Well, you're right. You probably shouldn't vote for me." But I think that's what the problem this country faces. I mean, we spent $20 trillion trying to eradicate poverty, and we haven't eradicated poverty. And you know, and you go to the news and you hear, you know, there's 63 genders, and you ought to tear down the statues of Robert E. Lee, and you're a patriot if you kneel down during the Star Spangled Banner in an NFL game. And I'm tired of it. And and I often reference Brookings Institute, that is a liberal think tank, actually, and you wouldn't think there'd be anything I'd want to repeat from them. But they came out with a study, and they said, if it's very simple. If you graduate from high school, you get a full-time job, and you wait until you're 21 to get married and have children, you have exactly a 3% chance of being impoverished. It's a pretty simple solution. It's not a real high bar. We don't teach our kids that. We've got a lot of people in this country that think somebody owes them something, and the attitude has to change. I am not a politician. I'm a businessman. I'm actually an investment banker, and there are certain people in our party that don't like investment bankers running because they think that the Democrats will say bad things about them because we're investment bankers. But what I do is I advise businesses on big transactions, and and a lot of those transactions that I've advised on have saved the lives of those businesses. They've created capital for them. They've restructured them. We've represented people in bankruptcy and brought them out of bankruptcy, and those companies still exist. I have a real problem with career politicians. In fact, for the last 20 years, I've been throwing stuff at my television, brought them out of bankruptcy, and those companies still exist. Gotten tired of listening to people. I have a real problem that have never been in the private sector, don't have the slightest idea how to create a job, and they're always pumping their fists going, jobs, 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 and they don't have the slightest idea. And I'm running against a guy named Sherrod Brown, who's been in office and on the government payroll for 44 years. And he majored in Russian studies at Yale University. And when he majored in it, because he would have been in my class, Russia was a communist country. So he studied communism, and apparently he liked it because a lot of his policies reflect that interest in Marxism. I've had it, and I think that people like myself, people that have never been in politics before, we need to step up to the plate. We need citizen legislators, because we've got to fight this big government push that we have going. When I first announced that I was running, the newspapers dubbed me wealthy Cleveland businessman. And I'll tell you a little story about that. My father was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach. He spent most of his time in wrestling. Our whole family revolved around what his wrestling team was going to look like next season. And in fact, he was a bit suspicious of me because I was a little academic, and he was a little worried that I was going to go too far that way. So he pushed me into football. We didn't have any small kids wrestling at the time where I lived, and he, I fell in love with football. So I played football through high school and college. But our family was always about sports. And when I was in college, I got a call in the hallway. And it was my mother, and I took the call, and she said, "Mike, your dad lost his job." My dad was a teacher and a coach, and he'd spent a lot of time particularly coaching, but he had a second job. He wouldn't get home until 10 o'clock at night. He supervised a recreation center in Cleveland, Ohio. And I didn't at that point realize the family was in crisis. And, I came home for Christmas break, and walked in the house and said, "Where's Dad?" And she said, he's at work. I said, "Well, where's he working?" She said, "He's working at a car wash in Rocky River." And I went to that car wash, and I watched the man that I most respect in life, a terrific man that cared about his family. I walked in that car wash, he was wiping down bumpers. And I realized at that point he would do anything legal to help his family and make ends meet. And not enough Americans do that right now. He didn't think anybody owed him anything. He went out and did it, and ultimately started a waterproofing business, and he did okay with that. He did that during the summer. But at that very point in my life, and I remember it so clearly because it was kind of a seminal point in my life where I decided to get my act together, and my act was always pretty much together, but I decided I was going to change the economic future of our family. And I've done that, and it's given me the opportunity to do what I'm doing right now. So most people ask me why I decided to run for office, and I'm 65 years old. Never thought about running for office before, and I have to tell you, I've got 5 kids and 5 grandkids, and really, if I was to lay the blame at anybody's feet, it's my second youngest son, and my second youngest son, named Ryan, graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in aerospace engineering with honors. If you know anything about that program, he had a lot of opportunities. And 2 weeks ago, my wife and I were in Pensacola, and we watched him be winged as a naval aviator. And nobody in my family was ever in the military. And I'm so proud of this kid I could burst. And we had gone down and visited him in Pensacola early in the campaign, or actually before the campaign, before I even thought about running for office seriously. And again, I was proud of him. In fact, he said, "Stop telling me you're so proud all the time, Dad. It's enough." But he decided to devote 10 years of his life to this country. And I thought to myself, where could somebody that started where I did end up in the position I'm right now, but for the fact that I live in this great country? So I had been involved in the Trump campaign. I was co-chair of his Ohio fundraising, and I met a number of people on the campaign, and those people ended up on his transition team. And told my wife on the way home, I said, I think I'm going to explore a job with the government, see if I can't get rid of some of this bureaucracy that we're engulfed in. And I went to Washington and interviewed. And I interviewed in HHS, and I interviewed in the Small Business Administration, and also in the Department of Commerce. And I'll tell you about HHS because it's kind of humorous, but I was interviewed as budget director. And I sat down at this table with 5 or 6 people, and very stern face. They said, "Mike, we're interviewing as budget director. How would you like a $1.2 trillion budget?" And I said, I don't think that job's for me. And I said, and by the way, not only is it not for me, but I don't even think this agency should exist. And so this is a very short interview. Wow. And I went on to the SBA. I was offered a job as head of the Office of Advocacy. It's somewhere between a deputy secretary and assistant secretary. And then I went to Commerce and interviewed with Wilbur Ross. And as I mentioned, I'm an investment banker. I'd known Wilbur from a number of transactions. And I ended up as one of the 3 finalists for Deputy Secretary of Commerce. And I'm still not sure they have one. So the job may still be open, because I think a lot of what I faced, a lot of people that try to bring out of the private sector face, they wanted me to basically liquidate everything I was doing in 90 days. And I just couldn't do it. I'm an investment banker, but it's over the number of years I've invested in other businesses, and I own other businesses. I just couldn't get it done. So I came back to Cleveland and talked to a number of my friends, and they said, if you really want to do something for this country, run against Sherrod Brown, because he's the worst thing that possibly could happen to America. And we did some studies and some analytics, and I said, I've never been a politician before, but maybe I can do this. And the numbers came out great. I think most Americans right now want somebody that's never been in politics before. And I'm going to give them an opportunity to vote for somebody like that.
Mike, let me ask you, because first of all, thank you so much for the timeline that kind of led to this decision. I think that helps a lot of people to kind of understand where you came from and how you how you decided to run for office. Help us understand, because for a lot of folks, you're cut from the same cloth, and certainly using a lot of the same appeal to your core constituency as Jim Renacci, both who built their livelihoods from meager existences. Both of you are using the appeal of someone who isn't a career politician. That's what is out there. Both of you were early on in favor of Trump's candidacy for president. So compare and contrast, if you would, please,
sure.
those who are looking to your campaign versus, say, Jim Renacci.
Well, I know Jim pretty well. I actually donated to his gubernatorial campaign. I'd like to get that money back now. But there is a stark difference. I'm an investment banker. Jim was a nursing home owner and a car dealer. And by the way, I applaud Jim for running for office, but he has now been in office 16 years if you add his mayor mayor's role in Wadsworth, and then 8 years in the House. I don't believe our founders meant for politicians, for people that held office, to stay in office for that many years. I think their policy, their philosophy was you learn, earn, and serve. You go for 6 years and you're out, or 4 years and you're out, and leave the space for somebody else to come in with some fresh ideas. And so there's a difference, and and I have to believe that running a nursing home or selling cars is a lot different than advising businesses on the most important transactions those businesses have ever entered into. So I've spent my life thinking on my feet, convincing people of the virtue of my ideas, solving problems, making transactions work. It's actually what you would think you would want in a senator. So I felt I had the right personal skills for it. I am a conservative. I am a philosophical conservative. I graduated from Kenyon College, and you might think of that as kind of a bastion of liberalism, but I can tell you this, I didn't have one Democrat in economics or political science. And I learned conservatism there. I'm a disciple of Leo Strauss. I studied Edmund Burke on out to William Buckley, and William Buckley is along with Ronald Reagan, are my two heroes. I am a philosophical conservative, not because I make conservative decisions as a businessman, and that's what Jim does. He's a businessman, and most of the decisions businessmen make are conservative. But that doesn't mean you're a philosophical conservative. So the gut feel he uses in business, as I do, most of those decisions turn out to be conservative. But his record has shown that he's not really that conservative. In fact, if you look at the Heritage Foundation, Club for Growth, on and on, his scores are very middling. They're 50s and 60s. You would see my scores looking more like Jim Jordan's. I truly believe in small government. I truly believe in that government is too big, too powerful, and too intrusive. And I think everything has to be directed in that way. Every bill, everything should have that in mind. And that is a conservative philosophy that you have to have when you do things. So we are very different. You can lump us into the fact that we're businessmen. Jim hasn't been a businessman for a while. I still own a bunch of businesses, and I'm going to have to get rid of those, and I'm doing it before I take office. But he's been long gone from business. And I'm coming fresh from having to deal with the regulations and the trouble that the government creates for business.
Well, Mike, Jim would say that he's at a distinct disadvantage because he's had to make the tough decisions in office. He has on this program, as well as through other interviews, pledged and successfully answered questions on every vote that was thrown before him. One of the questions, or one of the elements that you have in your favor, big news in the last week, is earning the endorsement of Senator Rand Paul, who is actually the endorsement of our parent organization for president, the National Republican Liberty Caucus, so he must have seen something in you that as the senator who stood on the floor of the Senate, protesting the increase in the size of government and bipartisanship in spending increases. Is the timing of those two things coincidental? How do you line up with Senator Paul with regards to how you would have voted, say, on the most recent budget bill?
Well, I think given his endorsement, you could probably assume I would have been standing there with him. Rand Paul is really the only senator right now that I think invariably is fighting for the American people. The reason I believe it happened is, you have to know that Jim Renacci was running for governor for a number of months. And as I said, I supported him, and I listened to his speeches over and over again that he no longer wanted to be a legislator, that he was ineffective in the House, he couldn't get anything done, and he wanted to come back to Ohio and get something done as governor. Well, I think that may be his skill set that was the problem. I don't know, but I am very persuasive, and I know that because I made a living being persuasive. I do want to be part of a legislative body, and I will be effective. But Jim Renacci, you know, you can look at his votes, but the Heritage Foundation, Club for Growth, they also look at those votes, and they give them rankings in the 50s and 60s. You know, I've seen the transgender bill that President Obama passed, where Jim was one of 42 Republicans that voted for it. You know, these are things that true conservatives don't do. He voted to continue funding Pakistan, where, you know, the Republicans wanted to stop funding for countries that are burning our flag. Pakistan is not our friend, and he voted to fund that. You know, I could go through, you know, a list of things that show that he doesn't have, you know, a conservative political philosophy in all cases. I do, and that's the distinction. And I think it's a pretty stark distinction. And I think, you know, you can hear, you know, you'll basically the reason that Jim Renacci is in the Senate race is because he was recruited by Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is a never Gibbons guy, and he's a never Gibbons guy because I went after him and the other people that couldn't seem to get anything done, including Rob Portman, when they didn't pass repeal and replace. And we had an unusual opportunity to get government out of healthcare. I want government out of healthcare. Is there any reason why government is involved in our course of care? Have you ever seen anything in the Constitution about healthcare?
Absolutely not.
Well, I recognize the government's going to have to pay for certain people. Certainly our seniors, we promised them health care after at 65. Certainly our disabled people and people that truly can't put enough together. And now I think most of the country wants to help out people with pre-existing conditions. But that should be the end of it. The payment level should be the end of it. We pay twice as much as health care as any other industrialized nation. That is ridiculous. And the reason is we have taken the very system that has gotten this country to become the greatest country in the world, free market enterprise, free enterprise, and we've rejected that in the provision of health care. We've let the government pick winners and losers. When you go and get an MRI, you have no idea what it's going to cost. You go to the Cleveland Clinic, you have no idea what it's going to cost. You're going to pay your deductible. Nobody's going to negotiate a lower price. We need to have competition. Competition is the only possible way to lower costs.
Well, so tell me, Mike, you know, what's a specific policy provision that would work then? You know, obviously there was a stalemate in both the House and the Senate as far as how to go about doing that, and so it fell flat. What would be a specific policy proposal that you think could garner enough votes that would finally undo this once and for all?
Well, we had an opportunity with reconciliation to cancel Obamacare. Now, you can't take millions of people and just all of a sudden cut them off. I get that. I'm not stupid. But what we could have done is canceled it, and we had 2 years to come up with a replacement. And that replacement could have gotten government out of healthcare. Obamacare was a massive change to our healthcare system. The Republican answer could have been a massive change to our healthcare system that eliminated government involvement in healthcare. I don't want somebody in Washington telling me when I'm going to get a certain treatment. That's what we have right now. It has to end. We had an opportunity, we blew it. And I went after Mitch McConnell, I have to tell you, because now he's done a great job on taxes. I think he did a great job on the Supreme Court. But, you know, I'm a voter, I'm a taxpayer. Mitch McConnell works for me. And by the way, if I go to Washington, I understand that you are my employer, and they need to answer to us. That's been lost. We have this ruling class now made up of career politicians that have this arrogance about them, that they think that everything they do is wise and we should just, you know, follow along with whatever they want. I don't believe that. I think the people need to get involved, and I'm a person that's getting involved because I consider myself an American and somebody that has some good ideas, and I'm willing to go through this awful year and a half of running for office, which, by the way, is awful in one sense because my life has changed. But I've met I've been to 82 counties in Ohio. I've given over 180 speeches. I have met some of the best people I've ever met in my life going around the state. We have great people, and this is a great state. And I can tell you that part of it's been great, but it has been disruptive. My wife,
Sure.
Diane, has been with me most of the way. She goes to probably 95% of the events, and I now depend on her. I need her there for support. She's great.
Well, Mike, with a couple minutes we have remaining, I'd be remiss just because it's so much in the news right now. Obviously, the shooting in Lakeland, Florida, the renewed debate around what's being called quote unquote common sense gun legislation. Obviously, our governor has come out and indicated that it is time to look at different restrictions in order to assist this effort, and that Republicans need to get on board. He's been very vehement about that. What are your thoughts online? Is there a middle ground here with regards to being able to enact some regulation that will indeed have the intended effect without hurting the legitimate Second Amendment rights of everyday Americans?
Well, see, I believe that Second Amendment was written to preserve our rights to defend against tyranny, and I will tell you this: I will never vote to weaken it. I think if we actually enforce the laws that are in place, I mean, this kid should have never gotten a gun. There were warnings, innumerable warnings. Somebody screwed up, probably the FBI, probably the local authorities. I don't have a sign outside my house that says burglary free zone. But every school in the country has a sign that says gun free zone. It is a soft target. We have created our own problem. There are many capable teachers that can be trained in concealed carry. It's sad that we have to do that, but evil is out there. And I think we're going to have to stop people from coming into school buildings. But there are simple solutions, and I don't think we're going to have metal detectors at every school. There are some that we do. But usually the problem, the problem people can be predicted they're going to be a problem. We haven't done a very good job doing that. Now, I think we've done a great job with terrorism, and I think maybe that we have to do the same thing with students. But for us to forfeit our rights, we are forfeiting rights that have allowed this country to be the longest lasting republic in the history of the world. And I am not willing to do that. And I don't think there's any middle ground on that. I think there's a lot of things we can do, but it's not about taking guns away from people.
Well, Mike,
and I'm adamant about that.
Thank you so much for that information. I promised you just 30 minutes, and again, you've been very gracious with your time coming out of the Ashland Lincoln Day dinner there to speak with us. How do people get in touch with your campaign, learn more about you,
Yes.
Donate if necessary? Where are you going to be? Just share with us how they can be in contact with your campaign.
Well, if they go to gibbonsforohio.com, I can tell you I wish there was a day over the next few months that I'm not going to be someplace campaigning, but there isn't. So if you look at gibbonsforohio.com, you'll see where I'm going to end up. And I know people can follow it because I have a tracker from the Democratic Party usually filming me no matter what I do. One of my supporters ran into my car after a town hall down in Newark, and it's on film by the Democratic Party. So he's caught everything. So if I'm going to be in your general area, please show up. I'd love to meet you. I have a rule. I'm always the last person to leave an event, and that's how I met so many great people. And oftentimes they have everything scheduled. You get up and give a speech, and nobody really gets to know you. I like to stay around and talk to the people after the speech. And I've met and I've got friends that are going to be friends the rest of my life just by traveling around the state. And I'd like to. Some of the people that are watching this, I'd like them to be my friends too.
Well, Mike, again, thank you so much. Thanks for allowing me to call you Mike. I do appreciate that. And best of luck on the campaign. I hope I get a chance to meet you personally as well. And
I do too.
I hope.
Where are you located, Bill?
I'm in Columbus, so I'm sure there'll be plenty of opportunity.
I've been there a lot.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
Kind of passed through there. And for any of you out there that are thinking of running for office, before you run for office, move to Columbus because it makes your life a lot easier.
That it does.
Living outside of Cleveland does not make it easy.
Well, again,
it's 4.5 hours to the Ohio River.
Oh my goodness, yeah, that makes it very rough if you're going to make a day trip down to Portsmouth or something. So
that's right.
Very good. Well, again, best of luck to you. I'll let you get back. If you're going to be the last person to leave the event, I'm sure you need to get back into the hall there.
I do.
And so, I really appreciate your time, and best of luck on the rest of the campaign.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
All right, take care.
Hope to be on again. Bye.
Well, everybody, thanks again for watching. If you missed our discussion with Jim Renacci, we had our conversation with Jim Renacci when he was running for governor, so we might want to have him back on to talk about some things at the federal level. You can find that information on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel. It's Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio. And again, if you're not familiar with who we are, our national organization, the National Republican Liberty Caucus, is the longest running Republican organization in the Liberty movement, started in 1991, and we're just getting started here in Ohio. An all-volunteer organization, and we could use your help. Got a lot of great committees that are doing some phenomenal work. Events like this one, keeping the lights on, that comes from dues from people like you. So check us out at RLCOH.org. We hope to have Melissa Atkinson on as well, who's running for Senate as well, along with Mr. Gibbons and Mr. Renacci. She'll be next up, so keep an eye on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel if you'd like to subscribe for more information. Until next time, my name is Bill Yarbrough, and we hope you'll check us out at the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio. Have a great night.